Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to episode 62 of this Whitewater podcast. Before we get into it, I want to let you know we're getting ready to launch a new show here at the Hammer Factor called The Hot Seat. I'll be bringing on athletes and professionals from outside the whitewater world to hopefully share their genius with you. The few interviews I've recorded so far have been fascinating, and I'm excited to see where this thing goes. Go to hammerfactor.com and subscribe to The Hot Seat, and don't worry, this Whitewater show isn't going anywhere. Thanks again, and here we go, episode 62.
You're listening to Grace, Geltman, and Weld on the Hammer Factor. Take it away, boys.
Restart. Starting this over. All right, here we are, episode 62 of the Hammer Factor Whitewater podcast. My name is John Grace, producer here at the show. I'd like to introduce my co-host, John Weld, owner of Immersion Research, Louis Geltman, policy director for the Outdoor Alliance. Louis, this show is going to be all about you, man. This is going to be Louis's victory parade.
The victory lap.
I mean,
holy hell. Yeah, dude. I mean, it's everybody's, right?
Yeah. It's been a while.
Cool. We got some stuff done.
It's been a while since we had a podcast. Since our last discussion, there was a lot going on with this public lands package throughout the course of the last few shows. It's been happening. It was going to get passed. It was dead. And then it was back to life. And now it's one small signature from being law, to the best of my understanding.
One large gold-flecked Sharpie signature away, hopefully.
Oh. So
Can I point out that we know this is a Whitewater podcast because all of us are wearing down jackets inside our poorly heated workplaces?
What do you guys keep the thermostat at your house? Somebody asked me that the other day.
Well, I just spent my entire professional career in crappy buildings. Like, the idea of going to work in a climate-controlled office is just, at this point, that's just never going to happen. Like, I'm just going to go to spend the rest of my life in cold buildings, and then hot in the summer.
I've been like huddled next to the wood stove all morning, and I just came into the office to record the podcast. What I've been intending to do is to start the podcast with an apology to John Weld for dragging him out to this frozen hellscape we live in that used to be some sort of whitewater paradise, but I don't know anymore.
I heard the Little White is full of trees now.
Really?
That's what Max is saying. It's like full of wood. He was very pessimistic. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, he was not too pleased with this issue.
Ugh.
Heavy snows and a ton of wood, like tons and tons of wood. He seemed to imply it was unprecedented, or at least in his experience.
Yikes, I hadn't heard that. That's a depressing note to start the day on. Like, any specifics, or just did he go, or that's...
They've been paddling it, and I guess they went in at like him and that Peter, what's his last name? Ellie?
Yeah, I know.
Eli?
Yeah.
They went in and cut some wood out at like 2-3 this weekend, but it sounds troublesome. I don't know.
well, if it makes you feel any better, it's 60 degrees and raining 3 to 4 inches a week here in the southeast. So if you need to warm up and go kayaking, just come on out. All right, boys, before we get into this show, I want to give a shout out to Extreme Sport Veco. You can go to their website /Hammer Factor. There is an entire guide to anyone who wants to come. Everything you need to know about transport to river logistics to pretty much anything you can think of if you want to go on a paddling trip there. And at this event, mountain biking, bouldering, longboarding, bike, trail, mountain biking, BMX, that's just the ground sports. In the air, they've got paragliding, base jumping, skydiving, speed flying. They got a wind tunnel that they do a comp in, swooping. On the water, they got kayaking, free riding, rafting, big air, like a freestyle competition. They've got the Honorable Citizen Challenge, these multi-sport events. This event is pretty much off the hook. Check it out, Extreme Sport Veco /Hammer Factor.
Dude, what do we have to do to get Hammer Factor flown to Norway for Extreme Sports Vaco.
I
want to go, dude.
I tried to figure out some kind of live coverage or something from there. I don't think they quite had the budget for it this year, but I want to go too. I mean, looking through that list and all the videos that they have on each of those things, I didn't even know all these air sports existed. I mean, I knew there was like skydiving, but I had no idea what they were doing with speed flying now. And anyway,
there were like, yeah, seriously. I feel like there were like a handful of times when, in the course of your kayaking career, when you see some piece of video or just somebody do something that you're just like, holy shit, I'm way behind the times. And like one of those times for me was seeing John Grace kayaking in Norway at some LBM or something like that.
Did you,
like,
you guys do?
Holy shit, these guys are on another level.
So I ran into Gavir at a ski shop here in town the other day. You guys know Gavir, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you know like Stefan from
Oh, yeah.
Saturday Night Live? You know that character?
Mm-hmm.
Geltman? Stefan?
From what?
Saturday Night Live?
No.
No? Anyway, Gavir is the Stefan of outdoor sports in the gorge because he's like the hottest new sport in the gorge is like kite blading. You're like, what? He's like, it's got everything. Kites, blades, foils, parachutes. Hawaiian guy's named Kai. And he immediately starts showing me videos of like this thing he's doing that I've never heard of before. It's like a stand-up paddleboard with like a foil on it. Have you seen this craze?
Oh yeah. This is a big thing. The whole foiling craze. Uh-oh. Well, I lost you.
So I've never been more interested in doing a stand-up paddleboard type thing as that.
Yeah,
It's like
great.
it's like a foil that goes down in the water. You like pump it like a skateboard. They're hauling ass around the Columbia on this thing. Anyway,
It is sick. I mean, because they can pump from like bounce to bounce, from wave to wave, you know. So they're like, when one swell like kind of fades out and dissipates, they just like look over their shoulder and like pump out to the next one and ride it. It's got some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, it looks cool. Like minimal paddling, maximum surfing. Yeah, I feel like I don't know about the whitewater SUP business in general, as we've well covered, but I know enough to know not to be dismissive of whatever your thinks is the new hot thing, you know.
This is true. Well, we got a big show lined up today. We got Rocky Contos on the show. You know, Rocky Contos, 107 first descents in Mexico alone. Did you guys know this?
I couldn't have given you that number, but
Well, I was just going over his bio, and I was like, whoa, that is like a serious stat. We got the Long Creek Gangsters coming on to ask Lewis a question about some logging in the headwaters. That ought to be interesting. I have no idea how that's going to
be a real low point when the Long Creek Gangsters stump me on whatever their public lands issue is.
We got a ton of listener mail, rants and raves, and much, much more. So, Lewis, let's throw it over to you. You know, for all of our listeners who don't have, let's do a brief history of this public lands package, what it's called, and then we'll kind of go to what's in it, what you wish was in it, and kind of get into the details there.
Man, yeah. So last week the House passed this huge public lands package that we've been working on for quite a long time. I think the actual title is like the National Resources Management Act or something along those lines. The bill number is S47. It's about 100 different public lands bills, like mostly protective designations, or some of them are kind of like more local issues, like transferring 8 acres of BLM land to a county to put in a water tower or something like that. But there are a ton of there's a ton of new wilderness, like more than 1 million acres of new wilderness, more than 600 miles of new wild and scenic rivers. This is basically, it sort of pulls together a ton of individual bills. Some of them are things that we've worked on for a really, really, really long time. And it reauthorizes the Land and Water Conservation Fund permanently. Again, something that's been a huge priority that we've worked on forever. Just like couldn't be more stoked to get all these things across the finish line. And I don't know. I mean, like so many of the things that we work on, like so often we'll be working on a protective designation. Like one I keep thinking about is this Mountains to Sound Greenway National Heritage Area, which is just east of Seattle. It's like the Snoqualmie Valley, basically, and it basically just helps the. It's a landscape that has federal land management, some state lands, some private lands, some county lands, and it basically just helps all of those land managers work together more effectively on sort of big scale planning. And, frankly, hopefully it's something that'll help, protect Ernie's, which AW just defeated that dam proposal on last year. But like that bill is something that we've worked on, at times more concertedly than others, but something that we've worked on for years and years and years. And it's like you just never know when the stars are finally going to align to get something like that across the finish line. And I don't know, it feels sort of validating when there are these bills like that we've worked on for years, never quite knowing what the end game is. To finally see those things through is feels good. Like it feels good to sort of validate that like irons in the fire approach, where there are things that we're working on, and it might take years, but eventually you'll get a chance to see it through. And the same with Land and Water Conservation Fund reauthorization. Like it's a super important program. We've talked about it on here before. It takes a portion of the royalties from offshore oil and gas drilling and redirects it towards conservation and recreation projects. The example I always use is the river access point at BZ Corner here on the white salmon. That's the takeout for the truss and the put in for the middle white salmon. Somewhere that I personally visit that parking lot probably 75 or 100 times a year. And it's just, it's just a parking lot and a trail down to the river. But like, as you guys know, with the green and all the access challenges you've had down there, sometimes that's all you need to like take some place that really is a public resource and make it truly a public resource, like a place that people have access to and can visit and do their thing, So yeah, just like pretty over the moon about it. It's probably, not even probably, it's the biggest success we've had in my time doing this work. So it's sick.
Nice.
And yeah, I don't know. Just, I was in DC last week and just like reflecting on, my time on the Hill and visiting, congressional offices or land managers. It's like I need, like when we send you guys emails, like if you're on the Outdoor Alliance email list and we ask you to write your lawmaker about something, like, it's important. We always ask when it's important. Like we're never just like, trying to fundraise by doing that or giving people something to do to feel busy or whatever. It's like those times when people in our community write to their lawmakers, it's like that's what creates that's like what validates me in a way so that I can go have those conversations, because nobody listens to me because I'm like clever or have some like great idea or something. It's because
do they listen to the Hammer Factor?
I've not run across any Hammer Factor listeners on the Hill.
Just a matter of time.
It's like those people.
I find that hard to believe, but
they it's like they care what I have to say because they know that I'm representing a lot of their constituents and like who care about these issues, and they're like, well, if I listen to Lewis, then I'm helping to do what these 200 constituents who wrote me an email want, and so like for me to be able to go talk to these people and have productive conversations kind of on behalf of the things that we all collectively want, it's like you guys help me do that when you write your Congress critters or call or whatever. So thank you guys.
So Lewis, in this act that initially passed the Senate, made its way through the House, do you know the stats on what's in there? I know there's X number of miles of protection for wild and scenic rivers. The LWCF funding is in there. What are kind of the laundry list of items that are in there?
Oh man, I can't even reel it off, but I think it's like more than 1 million acres of wilderness, 600 plus miles of wild and scenic rivers, the Land and Water Conservation Fund reauthorizes the program at $900 million a year, but that money still has to be appropriated by Congress. So the next thing, basically, the money comes into this account every year, $900 million, but it doesn't get spent until Congress spends it. And the next big LWCF related campaign is going to be to make that fund dedicated, meaning that instead of Congress having to say, yeah, we know we took in $900 million for conservation this year, but we're only going to spend $450 million, which is what's happened. That's about the average over the life of the program. We're going to make it so that, or we would like to make it so that $900 million just gets spent, that the agencies develop their list of priorities and the money's already there and it goes without Congress having the chance to basically steal a portion of this money and use it for other stuff, which is what's been happening for a long time.
For decades, that's been happening, eh?
That's right. The Oregon Wildlands Act was a part of this. It has a bunch of new protections for the Rogue and rivers down in southwest Oregon. Methow, headwaters mineral withdrawal. The Methow is like a super important outdoor recreation zone, kind of in like north central Washington, that's threatened by a huge copper mine. There's a mineral withdrawal for an area right outside of Yellowstone that was threatened by mining. This Emery County, Utah bill is just like, I mean, unbelievable that all of the various stakeholders and people who care about that landscape, from like SUA to Orrin Hatch, managed to come to an agreement on protecting this huge amount of wilderness down there, new wild and scenic rivers, new recreation area with mineral withdrawal down there. So just, I don't know, a ton of really good stuff. We're fired up.
That's so rad. So I saw in one of the emails I got from Tanya, there was mention of a few little things that didn't make it into the bill. What would that be? What do you got going on there, Lewis?
My pen just exploded in my hand.
Yeah, if you guys can see this, Lewis's whole arm is now black.
The biggest thing for us was this Recreation Not Red Tape Act that we've been working on for years and does a bunch of things. But the biggest thing is helping the land management agencies when they go through planning to look for potential new national recreation areas in the same way that they're required to look for potential new wilderness and potential new wild and scenic rivers. We worked hard to try to get that in there. We really pulled out all the stops, but there is a sense that, the Senate had not even given that bill a hearing, even though it had moved through committee in the House. And the sense is that the Senate is interested in doing some more recreation policy related stuff, rather than just, specific protected designations, that they're interested in making some policy changes to benefit outdoor recreation this Congress. So I had some good conversations when I was back in DC this week, and, we expect that bill to get reintroduced later this spring from Senator Ron Wyden in Oregon. Expect to hear more, but I sort of like our odds, honestly, this Congress.
And I'm going to talk more about this in my rant later in the show. I got a good lengthy rant to throw out at the end of the show, but
nice.
Just to have such bipartisan support and all of the time and that has been put in and it never got partisan, and just to pass through that's so much time and effort and work, and you and Kevin Colburn, AW, and all the different people who went in on that. It's just, from the little bit I know, oh my God, man, that's some good work.
Thanks, man. And it was definitely a huge team effort, and from Outdoor Alliance, our member organizations, Outdoor Industry Association, Conservation Alliance, all the traditional conservation organizations, just a huge, big, broad effort to make this thing happen. And, what you're saying about bipartisanship, I think, anybody who's listened to this show for 15 minutes, my personal politics are abundantly clear, but we try hard to not make public lands and waters a partisan issue. We don't want this to be abortion or gun control or something like that. We want this to be something where Republicans feel like it's a political winner for them to support these policies, and I think they're getting that message. If you look at polling, especially in the West or all across the West, is where I see it from. Conservation is a bipartisan issue for sure, but members of Congress on the Republican side have not always gotten that message, and it's a hopeful sign that maybe they're starting to get it. So it's good.
How do we get that message to my boy Mark Meadows, man?
Oh man, Mark Meadows is part of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and he votes against this bill. Like, how does that happen, dude?
I don't know. I mean, for one, write him an email, tell him you're pissed about it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds on the composition of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus, but I think they need to set a little higher bar for membership. Like you should have to actually do something, not just.
He's in the Freedom Caucus as well, right?
Sign up.
Isn't he one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus?
Yeah, I mean he's the.
That's a weird overlap of a Venn diagram between those two caucuses.
I mean,
Mark Meadows is the one intersection point.
I mean, I encourage all you guys in Asheville to lean on that guy. I mean, it may well be that he doesn't have any particular hard and fast opinions about our issues, and he just is mainly focused on defending Donald Trump at all costs. So maybe he's malleable on conservation. I don't know.
God, dude. I mean, he is just I was looking at his voting record, and talk about someone who doesn't seem to represent the people of Western North Carolina. I mean, geez Louise. It's freaking off the hook. I'm going to have to run against him. We were talking about that earlier in the show. That may be my first campaign, me against Mark Meadows.
Dude, do it.
Oh man, well,
Maybe we can repurpose all the Dan West memes for you.
Well, we'll see. We got a little time before I got to make that decision. MPFF, you guys were all crickets when we were going to do the live show out there, but I went to the National Paddling Film Festival this week. Is there anything, not to shift gears, Lewis, is there anything else you want to add to that before we move on?
No.
Okay. Anyway, congratulations. That's pretty rad.
Man. Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, to you and everybody from all the different land. I mean, dude, so much communication and time and effort and trips to D.C. and just beating your head against the wall in the tangled mess, and all of a sudden, poof. Do you think it's going to get signed?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I haven't really heard anything one way or the other. I looked to see if there was a statement of administration policy on it, which would be where they would issue some sort of veto threat, and there wasn't anything. It passed with veto-proof majorities, so I think we're good.
Nice. Anyway, National Paddling Film Festival was a really good time. There's some good films. I went to that film festival in 2003, long time ago, and man, they have certainly built that thing up. It's pretty cool. And one thing they had, I got to run this idea by you guys. A new discipline. It's not really a new discipline, but it's just a thing in paddle sports. So they had this race up there, the Jess Cup. They had full both men and women's classes in the SUP division. So they had they didn't have full classes in the kayak division, but the subdivision was huge. But anyway, there was 50 or 60 racers out there, and it's kind of a class 2.
Wait, paddling SUP in the winter in Kentucky?
Oh, crushing it, dude. They had 5 girls and 5 boys. Full classes. Yeah. So, but anyway, bear with me for a second. This has nothing to do with SUP, so you guys can,
We can relax.
Yeah, you can relax. You can relax. But they have this race, and it was pretty cool listening to everybody talk about it. I've raved about racing a lot, because it's a mass start event, and everybody at the party was talking about, some of the going back and forth, the boats they had. Some people were in sea kayaks. The winning boat was a Piranha Speeder. Do you know what that boat is?
Yeah.
Speeder? You ever heard of that one?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anyway, that was the...
Live in a cave? Yeah, we've heard of the speeder.
Well, anyway, they were just talking about...
Over 12 feet, of course I've heard of it.
Using this paddle by this company called Werner. Have you guys heard of it?
Well, dude, I never know with you guys. I never know. You know what I mean? I start talking about SUP and you drift off into wherever.
No, we're just waiting for this to cycle back to the green race, which is inevitably where it's going to go.
Well, The green race is currently done its job. Whatever. Whitewater racing, Class 5 racing is a thing. Longboats are a thing. Everybody's got them. It's kind of mission accomplished there. But this event, everybody was so stoked about it. So many different skill levels. It's time to start an ultra paddling series. Anything over 26 miles races. Okay? So on all of these class 1, 2, 3 rivers, we need like 40-mile races, 50-mile races, whatever. And we need to start an ultra paddling series. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think we should just hand the trophy over to Andrew McEwen right now.
Well,
Geltman has a point.
But see, that's what I'm saying. Like, he needs to be the ultra paddling world champion, and he can come down to the Battle of the Broad on June 1st, and then we're going to have the first ultra paddling world championship.
I've always wanted to have a race from the top Yak, like to put into the top Yak, all the way to the mouth of the Yak, Yakiani at McKeesport.
Oh,
And you can only pick one boat. You choose one boat. So if you can get like you certainly get a downriver boat down, like a wave hopper down the upper Yak. I don't know about the top Yak. You have to go across the lake. I don't know. It's long. I'm going to say 70 miles.
That'd be sick. Could you have like a partner? What was that?
What?
Could you have like a stage? Could you do it in like stages where you could have like 3 people on a team, one guy to do like the hard whitewater, and then another guy to get in and crush the flats?
I mean, to me, the interesting part would be the fact that you're going to, especially if it's one boat, you're going to be going across a 20-mile lake. You're going to be paddling class 4-ish whitewater. You have Ohio Falls in there, which is, if I understand this correctly, if you don't put in or take out on park property, you can run Ohio Falls legal anytime you want. And if you did the race, that would certainly be the case. It only becomes an issue when you access or egress the river on park property and run the falls at the same time. Geltman, does that make sense? That's always the way it's been explained to me.
I haven't looked.
That'd be sick. That can be the ultra paddling world championship next year. So
I've been wanting to have out here for a while to do a teams race on the whole white salmon, like from Trout Lake to the Columbia, but it would only be like 20 miles. But it would be a good race. We could extend it up the Columbia and finish at Chips.
anyway, those guys did a good job up at MPFF. It was a super fun event. I want to say thanks to those guys for having me up there. Man, how did we get behind already?
Can I go wash the ink off my hands?
Hang on.
We need to do a show like every 2 days.
All right, real quick, before you go wash the ink off your hands, Lewis, did you see this article in the Adirondack Explorer? Essentially,
yeah, when I was just doing my daily check of the Adirondack Explorer.
Look, dude, I emailed this to you, Cocksmoke. Jesus Christ. Man, God. Anyway, there was a big case, and they voted for this 17-mile canoe trip between publicly owned lands. There's this little 2 or 3. This is right up your wheelhouse. You need to be on top of this, my man. I got to write somebody, your boss, Tanya, or something here, because there's a piece of water. It's like 2 miles long. It's on private land. It intersects the 17-mile canoe route, and they just ruled that it was private land, and you couldn't use it to access between the 2 areas. Have you heard anything about this?
This vaguely rings a bell. There are a few places where access laws or right to float laws are sort of like perennially an issue. Like Colorado is the one that's always top of mind for me, because your right to paddle in small streams out there is I don't want to say your right is tenuous, but the laws around the laws are less than clear, and it's just constantly an issue. And I think New York might be a state that's in sort of a similar camp. So I guess I'm not surprised to hear that. But I don't really have anything else to add.
Yeah, a judge ruled that uninvited paddlers, I guess by the landowner, have no right to canoe the 1.8-mile Mud Pond waterway. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting case. This is something that we'll maybe have to bring somebody else who's got a little bit more knowledge in the future to talk about. Because I mean, just imagine you were talking about just paddling the Yaak. If there was like a section of the Yaak you weren't allowed to paddle, like a 2-mile section, because it flowed through private land on both sides or whatnot.
I mean, oftentimes the test is whether the waterway was susceptible to commercial use at the time of statehood, basically, and that oftentimes is judged by like its ability to float logs or float timber to market. And if there's no evidence that it was susceptible to some sort of commercial use when the state became a state, then access can get a little fuzzy. So it's not surprising.
One more over here to Lewis before you wash the ink off of your arm. This comes at us from Trevor MC Spick. He says, a while ago you guys were talking about the Shakti mat from New Zealand, and I think someone ordered one. Any reviews? That was you, Lewis, huh?
Yeah, have I not like bent your all's ears about the Shakti mat yet?
No.
You got it. You said you ordered it and it came in, but you were going to get back to us with the review.
Oh, dude, it's epic. I go to bed on it every single night and then just wake up whenever I wake up and pull this thing out from under me. But the Shakti mat it sort of looks like a 3/4 length camp mat, and then it's covered in these like spikes on top that are sort of reminiscent of soft spikes like on golf cleats. And so you lay on it and you get this kind of like bed of nails effect. And for the first like 4 minutes, it's pretty uncomfortable, especially if you hadn't done it for a while. And then your whole back just kind of relaxes and the sort of discomfort of it goes away. And you lay on this thing for like 20 minutes. I pretty much always fall asleep. And then when you get up, it's like you feel like you just had a massage. Like all the little tiny muscles in your back are like super, super limber. Like if you have like tightness in your back anywhere that's bothering you, it's pretty much gone. Like every single person I've given this thing to try has immediately gone and bought one. It's like, it's epic. Just like if your back is, I mean, just buy one. Seriously. It's super, super sweet.
I'll put a link to the Shakti mat in the show notes. That sounds rad.
Yeah,
now
I cannot recommend it highly enough.
All right. Well, you know what? We got a lot of people to get on the show here. Before we move on, let's get the Long Creek Gangsters on here.
All right. I'm going to go wash the ink off my hands.
See if I can find the Long Creek Gangsters.
Hello.
Yo.
Hunter Cooper, you're on the Hammer Factor. How you doing?
Yo, what's up, John?
How you doing, man? Where you at?
Dude, right now I'm actually sitting right here with Ben Drew. We are in the Humble Pie here in Long Creek, South Carolina. It's actually not open, but we are
we're poaching Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we're poaching Wi-Fi. And, we've been sitting here. It's a pretty nice place. So.
I wouldn't expect anything different. Well, welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for coming on. And
thanks for having us.
So, Hunter Cooper, Benny Drew, let's start off with, who are the Long Creek Gangsters and what are they?
Oh man, we're a paddling organization. It's a club. It's not a gang. It's a club.
Okay.
I don't know. We're just a group of guys that we like to go slicey boating and shred our faces off. But I don't know. We just like to go kayaking. Really, it's kind of become something more than really what it was ever supposed to be.
Yeah. So kind of just to where it all began is there's this gentleman named Glenn Webster. He's from somewhere out west. Ended up in Long Creek. He is the town hobro, and he was just always he's always saying keep Long Creek Gangster. So that's where the keep Long Creek Gangster came from. And then right when I started paddling, I started growing up with Holt and paddled a lot with him, and then met Ben and Jackson, and from there it kind of took off, and everybody's like, "Oh, you guys are the Long Creek Gangsters," and it's kind of funny because we were all sitting around talking about this the other day, but we definitely try to talk a lot of good stuff about Long Creek Gangsters, but it really came upon everybody else really talking about us and being like, Oh man, those guys are pretty cool. So we kind of went with it.
We're pretty cool, man. We're pretty cool.
Wait, I gotta back you up a second. You called him, what did you call the guy? The town what? Hobro?
No,
Hobro.
Yeah, the Hobro. No, the town hobo.
Oh.
Stays pretty intoxicated a lot of the time, but he's a good.
Yeah. So have you ever seen those old Team Scum shirts with the dude with the long hair on them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's Glenn.
Sick. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's Glenn.
And Team Scum made some shirts that say "Keep Long Creek Gangster," but they kind of just like let us use it, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a big fan, but we're not here to talk about the gangsters today. We're here to talk about logging in the Chattooga headwaters. So real quick, boys, give us an update on what's going on up there and maybe what our listeners can do to help the cause.
Yeah. So basically there's this thing called the Southside Project that's going on right now. And it's from the Forest Service, and it's a land management project in the headwaters, but basically it's a commercial timber sale. They're trying to log about 317 acres in the headwaters, up around section 00, and actually even over towards the Whitewater. There's a stand that goes all the way down to River Right where the mini gorge is. And so that's all proposed to be logged for sale. And the issue with that is, I mean, one, we really don't want like a bunch of logging up here, but the other issue is there's a lot of old growth in that area. And there's also like, the Chattooga River's the salamander capital of the world. And so there's this rare green salamander up there around Brushy Mountain, which is one of the stands. Basically, having that area logged poses a huge threat to the salamanders, as well as old growth, which we only have 0.5% of like left here in the southeast. So it's kind of this crazy thing that's going on right now that doesn't make too much sense if you're just thinking about it even logically. So
Southside Project. So real quick, I want to throw this over to Lewis and see if he's got any little nuggets of advice for these guys, any ways to stop this, minimize it, any way to move forward for them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Tell me, what have you guys done so far? I don't want to, or you guys just heard of?
Well, so yeah, totally. This has basically been a big project for the Chattooga Conservancy. The Chattooga Conservancy is a group that's here on the Chattooga. They're kind of like the guardians of it. For those people out there who don't know, the Chattooga is a wild and scenic river. It's amazing, and the Conservancy is basically kind of like the guardians of it. They're all about promoting, protecting, and restoring like natural ecosystems around there. So they have been fighting this thing from the very beginning, and it's become pretty visible here in the southeast. At least people around Long Creek are pretty aware of what's going on. There's a commenting process. Lots of people commented on it. There was a public meeting where there's even like a protest. I think 80 people showed up to the protest. And the Forest Service even said that it was the biggest like showing of people they'd had for a project in the past few decades. But they've still decided not to listen to it. Something that I forgot to mention earlier was that they just released like their kind of decision on it, saying that they're going to go ahead and do it. That logging wouldn't actually start until 2021, I think. But yeah, so I mean, it's not over yet. I mean, the Conservancy is looking into like legal action and stuff like that. And I think that the biggest thing right now is like just making sure the public is like talking about it, because the Forest Service works for us, and so we kind of got to make sure that our voices are heard.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Like, I mean, not awesome that that's happening, but I'm stoked that you guys are so on it down there and showing up for those public meetings and participating in the comment processes and, working with a group like the Chattooga Conservancy. I mean, all of that, it sounds like you guys don't need any advice from me, but yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about about forest planning and why it's, important for people to participate when these forest plans are going through revision, because that's kind of like the earliest opportunity to head off things like this by kind of identifying places in advance that really should be respected as not suitable for commercial timber harvest. I guess I've worked less on like specific timber sales like that, but I mean, it seems like you guys are really approaching it in the right way. Have you talked to Kevin Colburn about it at all?
I have not personally. I know that there's some interaction between him and the Conservancy. There's basically the Nantahala-Pisgah National Forest Plan revision is kind of in the works right now. They put out some.
Is this This is in one of those national forests?
Yeah. So this is happening in the Nantahala-Pisgah National Forest, which is in western North Carolina. But anyways, they're putting out this new revision plan, new revision, and it actually received over 20,000 comments. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going on with that. But part of that is figuring out which rivers are eligible to become wild and scenic.
Yes.
And so something that's super important that the public can be doing right now is making sure that, they're like certain areas. I mean, like Overflow is one of the Overflow Creek, which is a tributary of the Chattooga. It's not wild and scenic right now, but it was proposed because they said that it was
it falls under all the designations.
Yeah, it fell under all of the designations to become wild and scenic. And so as part of the new forest plan, they're talking about that, as well as the Whitewater, the upper Whitewater River is being talked about that, which if they decided that it was eligible to become wild and scenic, they would have to drop the stands that they're planning to harvest along the river.
Got it. So your understanding is that the decision on this timber sale would be potentially rescinded or not put into effect based on the new forest plan?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, some
Got
of
it.
At least. So there are, I think maybe 14 or 15 stands total that make up. They're all like relatively small stands, but all around this area in a pretty close concentration. And yeah, so some of them would become ineligible to be cut if, according to the new forest plan, depending on like what comes out then. So that's like where at least the public has the biggest opportunity to do something about this.
Awesome. So we've been, Outdoor Alliance, we've been working really heavily on the Nantahala-Pisgah plan revisions, mainly led by Kevin Colburn from AW. So, I believe, it's terrible that I can't recollect this precisely, but I believe that the draft plan is meant to come out this spring, and when that happens, there will be a big comment period around that and like a real opportunity to make a big public push here.
Yeah. But
I would love to help you guys out or like connect you guys to people who would have better expertise than me on this, and stoked you guys are fired up to fight this thing.
It seems
that'd be awesome.
It seems like all we got to do is give Mark Meadows a call and he'll
yeah, for real. Mark Meadows, take care of business, man.
I mean, so Colburn and those guys go in and talk to Mark Meadows like when they go to DC, and they've talked to him. I mean, I think that he had, early in the forest planning process in the Nantahala-Pisgah, he was ready to just like blow the whole thing up and just start throwing bombs at this process. And I, my sense is that Kevin and Mark Singleton, working with a ton of other stakeholders on that plan revision process, have like kind of walked Meadows back from that a little bit, and we're just like, no, like things are going good down here. We have this really unprecedented collaboration, working with the loggers, working with the conservation groups, working with the kayakers, the mountain bikers, and the climbers, and like we're all collaborating on this thing, and it's it's taken a long time, but we're working it out. Like, don't blow up the process. And he was like, oh, okay. So like, I mean, it's everything you want to say about Mark Meadows, like, even guys like that, it's not like totally futile to try to, try to talk him off the ledge a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey,
totally.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I got to be honest, you guys don't sound like gangsters.
Dude, I mean, this is just our day job, man.
Maybe like the Long Creek Citizens Alliance. Have you guys thought of maybe a name change or a rebranding effort?
No, man, we keep Long Creek Gangster.
Dude,
That's how it is. We keep
I
Long
think
Creek
the thing is, like,
They're very studious gangsters.
nothing but
if
gangster.
you- if
Nothing but
you,
gangster.
Like,
Being
know,
a conservationist
is
it's
gangster
not
as
a
fuck.
gang. It's a club. That's what you guys are getting all wrong. It's not a gang. It's a club.
the other thing is, like, a lot of people, get on and they'll start talking all sorts of stuff about how big and bad they are. But like, if you do it, you don't need to talk about it. That's all.
Hey, you're just laying in the woods with a 30-06, ready to smoke their ass. Hey, boys, we got to move on here in the show. I loved, your guys' big mission, going camping up there, all the pictures and all that kind of stuff. And, man, it's just like you're fighting the good fight. And I just wanted to bring you guys on to just kind of give you a little voice. And, you guys can go back to ganking people and whatever you got to do. But
Thanks, man. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Yeah, one last thing. I think that the most important thing people can be doing is like getting out there, going seeing the places, go up to Brushy Mountain, go down to the Whitewater Mini Gorge, go over to Ammons Branch, anywhere. I can give you guys all the GPS coordinates.
Yeah, reach out to the
show
gangster
notes and
page.
Yeah. So anyway,
hey,
yeah. Thanks very much for having us on.
wait.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, what do you guys think about 4th of July for the rodeo?
Whew, that would be sick. I just don't know how many people are gonna be here.
You think we got to do it later than that?
I think we got to do it later. I don't think I'm going to be here. I don't think Hunter's going to be here. I don't think Holt's going to be here. I think the constituency from our side of town is like not going to be here.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's kind of my thoughts on it too.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us. You
Thanks,
guys
John.
stay easy.
Yeah, thanks, boys.
See ya. All right, boys. Now we're on to Rocky Contos here.
Man, I feel like the Long Creek Gangsters are just continually rising in my esteem.
Hey, you know what? I'm gonna keep them gangster. I'm not gonna let them go soft. Not yet.
Who's the
please.
Tide Pod Bandits?
Tide Pod Bandits. The Tide Pod Bandits. That's Jake Cooper. They're also, super rad dudes. But Lewis pretty much put them into no man's land with the Tide Pod Bandits.
That was you, Grace. Stop trying to put that on me.
No.
Come up anything as witty as the Tide Pod Gangsters or the Tide Pod Bandits.
Was that me? Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, boys. that was not the best. All right, let's see if we can get Rocky Contos on here. No, I'm with you, Lewis. They're legitimately going up there and trying to make an effort. They all grew up there. They're super authentic voices for the region. So,
Sick kayakers.
yeah, and they're good at kayaking. All right, let's move into Rocky Contos here. Let's see if we can get him on. There's like 3 things we've passed by. We're going to have to do some more listener mails and some more things here in a little bit after we get Rocky off. You guys down to do that? I say we make this the longest show we've ever had.
What would that be, like 4.5 hours?
Yeah, let's just bust it until,
I feel like I used up all my talking in DC last week and just like talked out.
Rocky, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Rocky, you're on the show with, I can hear you just fine. You're on the show with Lewis Geltman and John Weld and myself. How are you doing?
Hey.
Great. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing pretty good here. We just got off the horn with the Long Creek Gangsters. Do you know about the Long Creek Gangsters?
No. Tell me about it.
They're not what they sound like, evidently.
Anyway.
Very nice
They
group
go
of
around robbing
young guys. You'd be proud to bring them home.
I wouldn't go that far, bro.
It's pretty cold out there right now.
It's a little chilly here in the southeast, but not too bad. Where are you at, Rocky?
I'm in San Diego. It's a little cooler than normal here, but it's still around 60 degrees.
Sounds brutal.
Well, Rocky, I got a few sentences here to introduce you. Rocky Contos is a PhD in neuroscience. You're the director of Sierra Rios, avid kayaker, rafter, explorer, activist, and guide. You have 107 first descents in Mexico alone, and you completed the first full descent of the Amazon, starting at the highest source to the sea. So that's quite the explorer's resume there. Is there anything I left out of that, or anything, any little tidbits about you our audience may want to know?
No, that's the main things. I've done quite a number of first descents in some of the other countries in Latin America and Central America, Peru, Bolivia primarily. And yeah, that's about all for exploratory stuff. And then I don't know if you're going to get into, but the other stuff I do a lot now is just, I was originally a kayaker, but I've started focusing on these raftable multi-day Grand Canyon type trips. And that's kind of encompassing most of my time these days.
Yeah, this is a unique thing. I do have that on my list of topics to go over with setting up the guided trips, getting the infrastructure and training the guides and everything. But first, how did you get into where did the fascination with Mexico start?
Well, so I grew up in California and started paddling out here on the Russian River in South Fork American and Northern California when I was in late high school and in college at UC Davis. And that was kind of during the time when the Holbeck and Stanley book came out, kind of in the early 90s, and everybody was, that whole decade, everybody was really amped to go out and paddle all those rivers in the Sierra, all the new tougher runs, and it was still kind of an exploratory mindset among a lot of paddlers to get out on all these. And what I did, I just looked, I said, yeah, all these rivers in the West and in the Sierra, Nevada and stuff, they've all been discovered, but pretty much nobody looks down just south of the border, all those rivers in the Sierra Madre of Mexico. I mean, what people have been doing and what had been known is where the rivers have water in the winter and the dry season. They go down to Veracruz, San Luis Potosí, and maybe Chiapas. And that's all kind of on the eastern side of Mexico. But most of the rivers in Mexico are the ones that drain into the Pacific, and they're very much more seasonal. They go with monsoon rains, which generally start up June and they're going through October. And that's when the rivers have a lot of water. And nobody really was thinking, I don't know, there just was hardly anything that had been done in all those river drainage systems that go down into the Pacific, starting from the Copper Canyon area in the north all the way down through Oaxaca. So I was really into geography and maps and looking at climate data. And I was like mapping out every one of the rivers and their drainage areas, trying to estimate their flows, gathering all the info as much as possible on everything and everything that had been paddled before down there. There were a few that had been paddled, but like of 100 rivers, most of them multi-day trips, maybe 10 or 20 had been done. So you get the right season, you get the right info and data and stuff, and it was just kind of going down there and just doing them all. I mean, I ended up doing a lot of it solo because it's hard to get boaters to come down for lengthy periods of time and do exploratories with you, but it was fun. It was an interesting time. I mean, I spent probably 10 years. I was going down there most years for a month to 6 months and just paddling all the new rivers down there.
So you were doing most of your paddling on the west coast of Mexico, going towards the Pacific?
I had started, and that's where all my focus was for the first 8 years. And then after that, I said I better do all the rivers that everybody already knew on the east as well. Yeah. So I went over there and did all the known ones and a bunch of new ones over there as well that people hadn't really looked at. Actually, there were a bunch of guys from North Carolina that came down one fall, and we paddled a bunch of first descents around. Where was it? It was around the the Alpha Seca, a little north of there. There's a whole slew of other rivers that people don't paddle very much. They're not all the greatest. They have portages and stuff, but there's some pretty cool other options there that people still don't know about.
For sure. Tom McEwen and I and a bunch of other people started kayaking down there in the late 80s. And we're down there every winter for I was down there every winter for about 5 or 6 years. And Tom's still down there every winter paddling. But we'd always focused on the East Coast. I don't know. Personally, this was based on pure conjecture. But I always felt like the West Coast there'd be a lot of accessibility issues, but then also I was always worried about crime on that side of the country. Did you have any experiences, like any real problems with that, or beyond the ordinary stuff, or?
So, overall, my experiences on that side and then all of Mexico have been really good. I haven't really run into major problems with people and narco traficantes anywhere. And it's true that there is a lot of drugs moving up through the country, and the publicity around the violent killings and attacks and the sequestrations and stuff. I mean, that makes a lot of big news, but that hasn't really affected me whenever I was out there doing all my trips. And I was out there alone a lot of the time. And I definitely met a lot of the guys who were growing weed in the Sierra Madre in places. I've come upon it many times paddling down rivers. You just come upon these big groves of people growing marijuana. They just have a ton of plants growing and nobody around. I mean, you can grab a plant or something. That can be a little risky, but.
So I don't want to get too into details, but I want to ask this before we move on to other subjects. What's your boat of choice right now for a big expedition? Like for a whitewater trip?
I still like I think I like the Nomad the most. Nomad or Mamba.
Nomad or Mamba. And then how many days can you make it in one of those boats?
I've gone up to 10 days.
10 days.
Packing in stuff actually, I'll say that I have so many boats around the world. I don't know. I actually really like the Liquid Logics a lot. Like a Stomper 80 is another one of my favorites. So I don't know. I can't pinpoint one of those boats for sure, but I'd say certainly the Nomad is very stable and reliable, and it has been for probably 20 years now, like a staple boat.
I guess when you put 60 pounds of gear in a boat too, the distinctions between them start to get blurred a little bit. So what's your food strategy? Like when you pack for 10 days, how do you pack the food?
So I always take out the back pillar of the creek boat, and that allows me to put in one large dry bag in the back, and then I just stuff that in there empty, or I'll put in like my thermarest in there to give it a little bit, put it out around the whole thing, and then from there I'll just stuff in all my other gear, including I always take a tent, I always take a thermarest that can be converted into a chair, and my sleeping bag, plus food and a little stove. And the food that I usually take, not always the lightest stuff. I mean, on these, if you want to minimize how much you take weight-wise, especially if you're doing longer trips, you need to take a lot of things like pasta. I take these dehydrated instant refried beans. I'll take tortillas. Bread is not that great to take because it squishes and then it loses its form and not very good. But I'll take cereal, dried dehydrated milk. You can make up that stuff. Dried fruits are great. Nuts, trail mix, tortillas, like flour tortillas, they hold up really well. You can take, what else do I take? Cans of tuna are really good. A little bit of condiments like mustard. I'll take a little bit of vegetables to put on my sandwiches or wraps. And then for dinners, it's usually a pasta or some kind of burrito, or a soup or stew type thing.
And then do you try and get gear in front of your feet, or do you not bother with that?
Oh yeah, it's always nice to try and balance the weight out a bit in a loaded expedition kayak. So I try to put heavier things up in front of the bulkhead, and that ends up often being a lot of the cans that I bring, and maybe a little propane bottle for my stove.
Mm-hmm.
But it also you're limited there depending on how easy it is to pull that bulkhead out. Sometimes, like the Liquid Logic boats, they're a little harder to always pull that out each day and put it back in.
What if I were going to go down to Mexico and I wanted to get on one of these overnighters that you've explored? What is the number one? What's the one I should hit?
Well, geez, that's tough. I have a list of probably 6 that are really tops to do, and it depends also on how difficult factor you want to challenge. But in general, the nicest ones that I would recommend have generally few portages, incredible scenery, clean river, clean water, few people around, and they tend to be about a week long. There's one that's not so difficult, and I take people on a lot in Chiapas. It's the La Canja. We usually take people down that in 5 to 7 days. It's about 60, 70 miles, but it's just a lot of travertine drops, and it's in really pristine jungle.
How do you spell that?
And you go by some Mayan ruins, and you see the howler monkeys and stuff. That area of Mexico is just so unique and different. It's just an incredible experience. But it's like a class 3 trip.
What's the name of it again?
That one's called the La Canja, Lacanja. But that's an easier one. And I would say if I were recommending something for maybe like you guys, go up to like a class 4 or 5 difficulty level. And there's one that always pops out in my mind as a great kind of multi-day kayak descent. It's actually in Zacatecas in Jalisco, called Rio Atengo. I've done it twice. There's an upper section that we do in about 4 or 5 days, and then a main or lower section that we often do in like 6 days. That's like a maybe 11 day trip if you do the whole thing, about 250 miles maybe.
Oh, wow.
Wow. It's a big one.
Just beautiful gorges you're going through, challenging, interesting rapids. There's a few portages in there. There's this one section you go by in the middle of it, I call it Sabino Alley. So the Sabinos are like these big cedar trees. You guys see them in the south in places, in the swampy areas. But there in Mexico, and starting around that area and going south into Oaxaca, you have those trees that line the banks of the river, and they just make an incredible, they're like giant wide trunks and a gorgeous section of river to float through when you have those trees along the side. And then you're going through, there's all these springs coming in and hot springs, and I don't know, that's just overall for quality of all those factors that I was saying before, just kind of minimal portages, interesting and fun rapids, being very clean river, and having really incredible scenery and little great camps and stuff. That one's one of the tops.
Rio Atengo? Is that what it was?
Rio Atengo, yeah, Atengo.
I'm sold.
Yeah, seriously, let's go.
But there is one issue with that one, and it's a little tougher to get it with optimal flow. That one is definitely a rain-fed river, so you got to do it in the main monsoon season, July, August, September. And I've been out there at least a couple times. I remember I was trying to do it initially, and I got stumped on the flow being too low, and they were actually drier kind of drought years. But when you get there, it runs pretty much every year. pretty good. The average flow kind of midway down is about 1,500 to 2,000 CFS. If you get it with kind of real low water, maybe 10% probability, you'll have something like 300 CFS, and then the upper 10% probability you might be seeing 3,000 or 4,000.
What about the worst trip? What about the one that you're like, don't ever go there?
Well, there's a few in that category. Okay, first one I don't recommend anybody going is the Grande de Santiago, the one that comes out of Guadalajara. That was a really big river, big drainage in Mexico. And it was one of the first ones that had been paddled in Mexico by Georgie White back in the late 50s and 60s. But it drains probably where 20 to 30 million people live, including maybe 5 to 8 million people in Guadalajara.
That's a pass.
It would have been an incredible river, incredible trip.
Except my skin fell off.
1320 would have been great.
There's one other I want to mention, and it's that I wouldn't do again, and that was one that Ben Stokesbury came down to do with me, and that was the Piaxla, and that ended up just having heinous portage in the middle of it that we went around this section. I knew there was going to be a terrible portage because you could see on the maps the river dropped 2,000 feet in like a mile or two. We ended up having to spend a full day portaging. There were like 13 rappels to get back down in the river. We ran out of water, led to some arguing. And it's a beautiful river. It's clean. It's got some incredible whitewater. But with that portage and then all the other ones that we had in there, yeah, it was just a little too much of the difficulty factor. Maybe with a pack raft, it wouldn't be so bad.
So how about the Amazon? What tributary did you paddle down on the Amazon? Where'd you start?
Well, yeah, for the Amazon, I had been doing all that exploration in Mexico, and then I was kind of at a change in career in my life and stuff, and I was actually going to go back and do an MBA. But then I was looking, I wanted to do one last hurrah and go somewhere very different and spend a few months paddling. So I always had Peru on my mind. I started looking at all the rivers there. And when I was doing the same kind of analysis on the rivers there, one of the biggest, most popular or interesting trips and rivers in Peru is the headwaters of the Amazon. It was always thought to be Rio Apurimac, which goes near Cusco, and then it flows down, and then joins a few other rivers. It becomes the Ene, and then the Tambo, and then the Ucayali. And the reason they thought that was the source of the Amazon is if you go upstream from the mouth of the Amazon as far as you can, that's where they thought that you would end up, is up at the headwaters or the source of the Apurimac. So I started looking at that, and I was looking at these other rivers that kind of looked about as long as the Apurimac to me. And I said, I don't know, do people really look at these carefully? So I started measuring those. And at that time, yeah, Google Earth was around pretty well, and you could trace and figure out exactly how far your trace was. And I determined that this big branch, the one that joins the Apurimac, it's called Rio Montaro, was almost 80 kilometers longer to get up to its source point. And I mean, I thought that was a pretty major discovery or change in what people would be thinking about, because there's a lot of explorers and adventurers who want to go and paddle from source to sea on the biggest or the most voluminous or the longest river in the world. And the Amazon kind of fits that bill. Depending on your definition, it's certainly the most voluminous river at the end, and it can be the longest river compared to the Nile, depending on which channels you take. So anyway, I thought that was pretty big news. I started writing up some grant proposals. I sent it out to National Geographic and the Chip and Tillman and all these, and nobody cared. Nobody wanted to expedition.
Welcome to Whitewater.
Yeah.
But then I got a hold of this guy who lives out there in Washington, D.C. now. His name's Piotr Milinski. He was one of the Polish guys, and he was kind of the central character in the book Running the Amazon that was published back in 86 or 87. And what they had done is paddle from source to sea, starting on the Apurimac. And he was the only one out of their group that actually paddled pretty much the entire length of it. The guy who wrote the book, Joe Kane, walked a lot, and he rode in the raft for some. And then he paddled the whole lower flat water section with Piotr. But anyway, that guy Piotr, well, there was a whole saga thing going. There was another guy that same year who was thinking, this was 2012, he wanted to do the same trip that Piotr had done and just do it in the fastest way possible. His name was West Hansen. So I contacted him just to see what his plans were, how he was planning to get down all the whitewater, because he wasn't a whitewater paddler. I didn't tell him my discovery yet, but he was in contact with Piotr Milinski, and I had already initiated a little bit of contact with him. Anyway, I got contact with Piotr, and Piotr had a lot of connections with National Geographic. I told Piotr my discovery, and he said, "What? These guys at National Geographic aren't doing anything about this?" So he went and talked to his friends there, and he said, "If they don't fund you, I will personally fund your expedition."
Oh.
So he came through with it wasn't that much. It was $5,000 or $7,000 we could use to. I got a few of my friends out there, and we did that whole source expedition. And my goal at that point wasn't to do the whole Montaro starting at the source all the way to the mouth of the Amazon. I just wanted to cover the whole new section of river, which was the whole Montaro, which was about 800 kilometers or 500 miles of river, starting up at over 4,000 meter elevation, or what that's like 14,000 feet, and you're going down to maybe 200 meter, 300 meter elevation, so maybe 500 or 1,000 feet. And I wanted to cover all of that as the expedition, and also paddled the entire Apurimac so I could compare the distances with a GPS as one of the ways to actually measure them accurately. I mean, you can look on satellite imagery and get a pretty accurate distance of how long a river is looking at that way, but also just taking a GPS and tracking as you paddle down the whole river is another way.
How long did it take you to go from 14,000 feet to the ocean?
Well, I paddled the whole Montaro and then all the way down through the end of the Andes, which was roughly, I don't know, I think it was 1,400 kilometers or so, maybe 800, 900 miles. And then that to do the whole Montaro took almost a month. And doing those extra sections to the end of the Andes. And then from there down, I had the choice to paddle the rest of the way. So the rest of the way on the Amazon would be another like 5,000 kilometers. And wasn't very appealing to me at that time, to paddle the flat water all the way. And there were a lot of other dangers, risks involved in that section, because when you're paddling through the jungle, there's a lot of people who will come up to you and just rob you. I mean, they call them pirates, they call them bandits or whatever, but they just don't care who you are. They'll come up to you with a gun and they'll shoot you and take whatever you have. And that's happened multiple times to people paddling, especially in that section near the Ucayali. But anyway, I forewent the solo paddling on the river all the way down, and I hopped on motorboats. I did complete the whole journey, but I wasn't paddling the whole thing. And so I came under a little bit of criticism because of that, but whatever. I completed it all the way to the mouth. So.
Well, I'll give you props.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, man. So let me ask you. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
to do the whole thing, you could go down the rest of the Amazon in about 3 or 4 weeks. 4 weeks on motorboats, and for the I got something. Hold on here. Send a voicemail. Yeah, and for the part in the Andes with all the whitewater, that took a little over a month. So you can do it all in about 2 months if you don't mind hopping on motorboats.
Through all this time, Rocky, when you were going down and doing these 107 first ascents and whatever, how were you funding all that? Were you like living in your mom's basement, or like how'd you pull that off?
Yeah, that was all self-funded, and I'm not wealthy by any way you might define it. I basically, I put myself through college and stuff with scholarships and just work study and stuff. And I was working as a postdoc and not making very much money doing that, but it was enough. Without having like a family or anything to support, I think with general wages that you make in the U.S., you can work 6 months a year and have enough to travel. If you travel frugally, you can still get out and do a lot of paddling and just traveling. But yeah, when I was down there, I would drive my Toyota pickup down, and I would sleep in cheap hostels or stay with families or friends or be camping most of the time when I was on the trips. So it ended up not costing. I mean, I can't remember how much I needed for 3 months. It probably came out to like $6,000, a couple thousand a month or something.
Well, did you keep records of all these things? I mean, is this published anywhere or online? I mean, some place where you can see a documentation of all these amazing things you've seen?
Yeah, I took really good notes and was writing up everything, and that takes a lot of time too. And I wrote one full complete guidebook to one area. I call it the Mexican Whitewater, the Norte area, and I had 3 other areas that I was going to do: the Occidental, the Sur, and the Oriental, so like the west, south, and east. But there's a lot of material in there, a lot of rivers. It's probably too much for most people. And you can, I've sold a bunch of those books. I don't really promote it or do much to sell it. There was another book on Chiapas and Belize that I co-wrote with Greg Schwendinger, who's a friend of mine, who was doing a lot of the same kinds of exploration in Chiapas, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. And the other areas, I still haven't gotten around to compiling and publishing those books, but I have all the data here, and I have a bunch of photos up of a lot of those trips on the website that I have, which is sierrarios.org. You can look at some photos there. I think people see that sometimes. I get an email here and there of somebody interested in one of the rivers in Colima or Jalisco or something like that. But...
So can you, this is sort of like a 2-part question, but can you talk a little bit about just your process and everything kind of leading up to the put in? Like, how are you finding these places? How are you prioritizing? How are you thinking about weather? And then just sort of like from that, like what's your advice to young guys out there right now who have time, want to go get on a mish and, hear this and are like, I want in?
So if you want to do an exploratory or a first ascent, I think that was my mentality for a lot of these trips. I'll just address that first. You got to do your research on the river. You got to know a little bit about its flow characteristics. So you got to know about the climate of the area if you can't just get straight hydrological data. You got to know if it's rain-fed, if it's snow-melt, if it's spring-fed. I mean, some rivers have wild fluctuations, like a lot of the ones I was doing in Mexico that are rain-fed. I mean, they go up and down. You guys in the southeast there, you guys are used to that because you hop on a lot of those little creeks and stuff only right after a rainstorm, I know.
Well, they always run now. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, so for something like Mexico, in that area of Mexico, once you know kind of the general characteristic when the monsoon rains are coming in, when the rivers are going to have enough water, that you kind of plan your trip to be during that time. I mean, you can still get unusual low flow, or you can get an unusual flood, but in general, it's going to be kind of in the middle area of the flow range. And once you know that, you also need to look at maps to find out where you're going to put in, where you're going to take out, what the gradient is on the river, give you an idea of roughly what the rapids are going to be like. And when you're looking at a real small creek or something, yeah, you can go for 100, 200 feet per mile and expect it to have a lot of cool and fun whitewater and probably some portages. If you're looking at maybe 50 to 100 feet per mile, which is probably a little more ideal and reasonable, you'll have a lot fewer portages, a lot more paddleable stuff, and not much flat water at all. If you're looking at 30 to 50 feet per mile, you're looking at more like a class 3 or 4 river. So you got to have kind of an idea of what the characteristics are going to be like, what you're expecting, and that kind of determines who else might want to join you. I mean, not everybody is just a gung-ho class 5 exploratory kayaker to go out and challenge anything. You can get stumped big time going out on some of those and just having a portage fest and people getting hurt and things.
Where would you send an ambitious crew looking for some rowdy first ascents? Where would you point?
There's a lot left in the world to do. There's a lot left in Bolivia. There's a lot left in Africa. There's a lot left in Asia still.
Specifically, where in Bolivia?
So in Bolivia, I've been out there running the 2 really big Grand Canyon type trips, which are the Pilcomayo and the San Pedro Grande are the ones. But each of those has a lot of tributaries coming out. We haven't run all those. And when you get down, the rivers in Bolivia kind of start up in the Altiplano, and then they go through this desert area, and then they go down into the Amazon jungle type stuff. The jungle areas gets a lot more rain. The rivers have more reliable flow, and there's a lot of those that still have not been paddled. And even up in the highlands, there's still a lot that hasn't been done. And I think a lot of that is because it tends to be a little more seasonal. I mean, their monsoon season is the opposite of what it is in Mexico. So they're generally flowing January, February, and March.
I've always wanted to go to the Bolivia-Colombia zone.
Yeah, Colombia has had a lot of exploration done by Jules Domin and a bunch of other guys who've been going out there and knocking off everything that's in Colombia. But Colombia is nice in the sense that those rivers pretty much flow all year, and they get rain almost every month of the year. So you can go anytime and find them going well. But in Bolivia, yeah, if anybody's interested, just you can send me an email. I can send you some maps and stuff, and you're on the right track for some.
Careful what you ask for. You're gonna have about 300 people emailing you. So a while back, we had a discussion here on the show amongst us about sort of a guilty pleasure that we had all enjoyed, which was solo paddling. And then subsequently, we got a lot of heat from it from our family members and also listeners saying it was unsafe or unethical to go out paddling by yourself. Clearly, you've done a lot of this and have different thoughts. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, there's definitely a big safety factor that comes with paddling with a friend, or a competent friend, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do paddle alone, I mean, if you're willing to accept the risks, that's exactly what it is. I mean, and yeah, I've done a lot of my first descents and exploratory stuff solo. I would back off if I thought the the river was going to be real serious, class 5 with some really difficult portaging, I would wait until I had a partner to do something like that with. But going out on something that I thought was class 4 with a few class 5s that I'll probably be able to portage around if I want, yeah, I didn't really have any concerns or second thoughts about going in there solo, even if it were a 4 or 5 day remote trip. And that doesn't mean I never got into problems because of that. I've had my share. There's one time I remember, and this wasn't even, well, here's a little story. One of these rivers I did on the coast of Michoacan. It's like a 3-day thing from up higher in the mountains. Good class 4 or 5, and then you get down. What I would often do on the rivers is paddle them all the way out to the coast, and then from there paddle up to a little village somewhere with a nice beach, and from there try to get back up to my truck or something, or if I didn't have a shuttle driver, bringing it back. And that's one particular river I paddled down to the end. I was solo, and I'm like, great, I'm all down here at the ocean. And I'm looking out at the ocean and see some waves coming in, and I'm paddling out into the break zone at the mouth, and all of a sudden there were some sleeper waves that just kind of they come up out of nowhere. And when you get like a 10-12 foot wave that just comes up and crashes you over, it's usually not a problem. I mean, you get pummeled a little bit, then you roll up and you have to deal with the next, try and get out. But in this case, one of those hit me pretty hard, and then it took my paddle away. Then I hand rolled up, but I couldn't get back to my paddle before the next one started coming in and started pumping more. So then I had to swim, and then that was a bad situation because it was at just before dusk when I was there trying to do that. So I got really pummeled around, stuck down on the sand a bunch of times. I finally made it in to shore, but my boat with all my camping gear and my wallet and my paddle were out there in the break zone or beyond it. It got dark. Then I had to, I tried to talk to some people around there, and ended up sleeping out in some hammock and getting bit by mosquitoes. I got dengue. I didn't get the boat back. But that just kind of gives you an idea. That if I had a partner there with another kayak or something who wasn't running into the same problem, they could have gone out, gotten my kayak, kind of avoided that whole situation for me. But because I was solo, I ran into problems like that.
That's an epic story. I mean, the way you delivered that story, Rocky, it was
an understatement in it.
Yes.
That's from like the "it's not over till it's over" files,
Yeah, it's not always just like some heinous class 5+ gorge rapid that you're going to come upon. Those happen too, but that's kind of more of an exception than the rule for when you run into problems as a solo paddler. I mean, solo paddling problems are more you lose some gear, or you have to walk out, or you get hurt, and you don't have somebody to really help you get through that situation easily.
Before we run out of time, one thing that I thought was super interesting on reading up on your bio, and I think this is a really unique form of activism, and I don't know if you consider this activism, but you'll go to these places, kind of do the first ascent, set up the logistics, and this is I saw you do a profile on a river in Argentina. The name of the river is escaping me. It came out of a dam. It had super clear blue water, but you'll set up this rafting operation, you'll train up some guides, and you'll kind of create this little, I don't know, I want to say a little business, little job opportunity there on the river where it didn't exist. Did you find some success doing that one time and decide to replicate it? How did that idea come about?
Well, that idea mainly came about just because out of the conservation aspect. I mean, I want to bring more people out to these rivers. I want them to be known. And it's only when people start knowing what the rivers are like, what they offer in their natural free-flowing state, that you get people wanting to protect them.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that 100%. Lewis, he really doesn't want people to take pictures of the rivers and promote them, but I'm fully in your camp, Rocky. Sorry, that was an inside joke, Rocky, from shows back. But I think that's genius.
but yeah, so like on the river in Argentina, there's that one that has this nice clear water. It's actually a fairly popular river now, the Illuminae. But there's the Grande Colorado is the one that I run the longer trip on there, and there's nobody paddling it. I mean, I did the first descent of that trip, and now it has. I was concerned, but I didn't think there were dams planned on it when I went down there the first time in 2015. And then the next year, I was reading about these plans to put this whole big dam complex in, and 5 dams on the whole upper river. And then last year, just a year ago, the president, there was all these political things to try and get those projects through, but the president of Argentina conspired with the governor of Mendoza, and they overrode some of the other politicians who didn't want to see that project go through, and they approved it. It hasn't been started yet, but they approved it, and it's kind of open for a construction company to come in and take it up. They're having big economic problems in Argentina right now. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but it's just sad to see that, because you get these incredible rivers like that, and this is like a river as nice as like the Middle Fork and Maine salmon, and nobody's out there paddling it or something. And if you had a politician here say, "Oh, we want to put a dam on the Middle Fork salmon," I mean, there'd be a huge outcry, and that's because people like to go there. They like to paddle it. They like to go there and fish and camp and just kind of enjoy it in its natural, beautiful state. But and people realize that. I mean, and it helps to. But what I try to do is just make more awareness, bringing the people out there, putting out these little petitions online so people read about, putting out video, writing articles. That kind of all gets the ball rolling, and then movements start. And there's a river in Peru that I did a lot for, the Marañón. Which there's a lot of other people who are out there bringing other people to paddle it, and generating a lot more activism and getting a little bit more involved with the politics there too. It's good. I like seeing that happen.
For sure.
Well, hats off to your passion, Rocky. That's super, super cool. I don't know, man. You've been silently doing a lot of amazing things in the background for many years. Personally, I've been following a lot of your trips and exploits. I know that we've had conversations in the past about, going down, and I picked your brain about some spots in Mexico and whatever. But I don't know, super interesting, and thanks for coming on the Hammer Factor. Do you guys have anything else for Rocky?
No, that was awesome. Really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to discuss some of these things with me. If you guys ever want to come down on some trips, there's a lot. I got this equipment all over the world, so it won't be so difficult to fly with a kayak necessarily.
So where can our listeners learn more about you? Are you on social media platforms? Is it your website, Sierra Rios, the best place to find you? How does that work?
Yeah, if you want to find, right now I have all the information up on that website, sierrarios.org. And it's not a greatly designed website right now. It's kind of a hodgepodge of stuff. I got some upcoming trips listed, some links to the books and various new things, and a little map there in Mexico. But you can, if you browse through there, you can find a lot of information on the website there. I'm on Facebook as Rocky Contos. You can just, I post a lot of stuff there. And I write an occasional article or something. So, but if somebody's interested in any of these places, yeah, let me know. Big thing that's coming up for me in a couple of months is a Yangtze expedition. So I'm kind of upset on that. I'll be out there for about 2 months to paddle all the remaining whitewater on the Yangtze. That's got a lot of dams on it already, and more
For sure.
going.
Well, we're going to have you back on the show after that big adventure.
Yeah, be great.
All right, Rocky. Well, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Great, I appreciate
great.
you guys. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
That's awesome.
Fascinating, huh?
Yeah. What am I doing with my life, man?
Right? What's wrong with you?
Well, we've got a lot of stuff to get into here. We've got a lot of listener mail. We've
I'm
got
feeling like a 2-part show. We can knock out 2 shows here at once.
we've got some boat designs and reviews. We've got the high and dry to talk about.
Big news of the high and dry.
The high and dry. We got a lot of emails, a lot of comments on the high and dry.
I feel like there are like these things that like I can tell must have taken off on social media somewhere, and I've just totally missed it. And like all of a sudden we get like 7 emails about something like the high and dry, and you're just like imagining that there must be some brouhaha on Facebook or YouTube or something, or Boater Talk or whatever.
Well, let's just put that aside for a moment. Back to that. Okay, can we talk about Tom McEwen?
Yeah, lead us off.
And this is a great segue from Rocky Contos to Tom McEwen. McEwen.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of episode 62. Part 2 of this show coming soon.